Okay, now that we have our scale relationship set up between both UE4 and Maya, let's go ahead and look at some very simple modeling and do a stage what I consider is called a proxy stage. This is a very simple representation of the thing that you're going to build, and this is going to be able to be used by other departments and yourself. This way, other departments can kind of work with this proxy object and get an idea of what is going to be final in the game, but it's a representation of the shape and the overall things like maybe collision, things like that. So let's go ahead and go and say create polygon primitives, and let's do a cube, and we'll do an option box. Just so you know, if you want to keep using these options, you can click that top bar and you can tear this thing off right here. The other thing that I'm going to have through this series is have this up here where you can see the polygon count. So we're going to go to display, heads up display, and make sure that polygon count is on for that. All right, so we've got these polygon primitives. We're going to do a cube. We'll do the option box, then that way we can control the size of this. So we're going to make this a width of 100, height 100, and depth 100, like that. And go ahead and hit apply. And you can see it should put a cube right in the center of the screen here. If not, then we've got this create polygon primitives. We've got this interactive creation. It's probably on by default. I'm not a big fan of that option, so I'm going to turn that thing off. That way I can create primitives and things like that the exact size that I want, and it just throws it right into the center of the world. Okay, so I'm going to hold down Alt and middle mouse to kind of pan up just a little bit like this. We've got it on the move tool. I'm going to push this up just a little bit like this to kind of see where this thing should be. You can see over here in the channel box, if I type in 50 for this, it's going to give me an exact number, and this is going to sit exactly on the floor. Because if we go to the creation options for this thing, you can see that we've got that width of 100, height and depth of 100. So moving it up from halfway where the pivot point is by 50 units is going to put this right on the floor for us. Okay. In the earlier video with the scale reference, we showed how to take the mannequin and put it on a layer. So I don't really need to see him right now. We can see kind of like how big this crate is going to be that we have. So I'm just going to turn off the visibility of that. And then after that, I'm going to select all the faces on here. So you can always right click on an object and go between object mode. You can select faces, you can do verts, and you can do edges for things, right? So this is a really easy way to get to those options. The other options for you to do that is if you tap F8, you can cycle between object and component mode. You know that you're in object mode if the object is green and it turns into these different kind of colors. Maya's got this context-sensitive kind of selection method now for things. Like if you're in the face mode, you should be able to select faces. So if you want to select faces, it's F11. If you want to select edges, you hit F10. And if you want to select verts, it's F9. So just remember F8, F9, F10, F11 will get you to those different options that you can do the same thing by right-clicking and say object mode, edge, vertex, and face. Okay, so now that we've got that kind of established, let's select all of our faces on here. So I'm going to hit F11 and just drag a marquee around the whole entire object like this. So that's pretty simple to do that. And then once I've got that done, I can hold down Shift and right click, and I'm going to get a context sensitive menu, and I'm going to go drag straight down to extrude face like this. As soon as we do this, we get some options here that you can see that if we want to control the thickness, we can just click and drag. You can see how over these words that you see here, it's going to allow us to do options for this, so we can click and drag left or right, and you can see we can either do the thickness inside or outside like this. What I'm actually going to use is I'm going to put a thickness of 0 for this, and we're going to do an offset. And nothing's going to happen until we say this keep faces together. We're going to change that to off, and then once you see that, then we can do this offset. And it's basically telling it for each one of these faces do this operation. So we're going to do an offset of 10 like this. Okay, now we can do another extrude function on this, and I know I want to kind of push this in. If you accidentally click off and let go, you would be able to select one. If you want to keep adding to a selection, you hit Shift, hold down Shift, and keep adding to that selection and kind of move around that you see here. So to rotate, I'm doing Alt and left mouse like this. And so I've selected all the faces again. Now, if you accidentally click off like that, you can always hit undo. Maya's like really good about going backwards and getting that selection back for you. So just maybe if you accidentally clicked off, just hit undo. Okay, so we're going to do another extrusion on this. So we're going to hold down Shift, right click again and say extrude face. And this time I'm going to do a thickness and then pull this in like this and then do, let's do -4 like that. Okay, so here's our new box that we have here. Left mouse with Alt, and I'm going to be rotating around just a little bit. We got the view axis on here, so you can see that we've got the Z axis pointing this way and X this way. Alt and middle mouse, and I'm going to pan and Alt and right click, and I'm going to zoom in and out. So you might want to just look around your object, just kind of inspect it, make sure you've got all the faces this way. So the other thing is we're going to go to object mode. We're going to go right click on here and say object mode, or you can click F8. And you can see we've got history being built up on here. So these are the different operations that we've done in here. We can delete the history on that. Maya is notorious for kind of messing things up if the history gets too much on there. So we're going to go edit, delete by type, history. And the hotkey for that is Alt-Shift-D. So you want to use that quite a bit. Now I'm going to call this thing Proxy crate _ crate like this. And let's go ahead and save our scene. So I'm going to say file save scene as, and then I'm going to call this O2 and call this Proxy _ crate like this and say save as. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and take this object and we're going to go ahead and push it on over to UE4. In order to do that, select the crate. We're going to go to File, and we're going to go Export Selection option box, and then we're going to change this to the FBX export type. If you want, you can go to the Edit the Presets, and what I make sure that we have on for UE4 is make sure Smoothing Groups is turned on, Tangents, Binormals, Smooth Mesh, and this thing's on by default in here. If you're going to do animation, you'd want to have animation turned on, but we're not really doing it. Don't have to worry about that. And you can save this as a preset if you like. I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm going to say Export Selection, and then I'm going to navigate up one folder. I like to make sure that I've got an FBX folder for everything that I export out for this thing. So I'm going to call this thing Proxy, I'm actually O2 because I'm going to tie this to the video. Proxy _ crate like this. Say export selection, and then we're going to go and I'm just going to take the Windows key, tap that, and then hop on over to our UE4 project. Now that you can see that we're in UE4, we were looking at how to find the mannequin before, but under content we can start to build our own folder structure and start to keep things within there. Okay, so I might go under content, say new folder, and maybe I'll call this environment, and I'll take and store all the stuff that I'm going to be doing for the environment in here, and I'm going to right click and say new folder, and I'll call this crate. So this is really cool how you can really organize your content within here. And within crate, I'm going to go within here and then right click and make another folder, and I'll just call this proxy like this. And I'll go into that folder, and you can see here's this directory structure that I've made for this. So now I can right click and I'm going to say import to game environment crate under crate proxy. Okay, we're going to import, and then we're going to have to navigate to where that object is under Windows. Sometimes I can go and just do this quick access thing. Sometimes that works. If not, then I might have to actually navigate to where the thing sits. And so I'm going to go here and go to my FBX folder that I've got. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that crate and hit open. And there are some options that I want to tell you about for this. So if you've got a bunch of different pieces that you're exporting, you're going to want to say combine meshes. We don't have to worry about that right now. It's just one single object. I just want you to be aware of it. And then also, whenever you import for the first time, it's going to ask you, do you want to import the materials and textures? You might want to do that, but we don't really care about that right now. Sometimes that can just import some extra kind of junk. So we're going to turn those off, and we're going to go ahead and click import. And it might have some issues with some of the tangents and things like that. I think we can probably ignore that for right now. we're just going to double click on this thing and open it up and then take a look at the object that we have here, and you can see that here's our object that we have. And if we take a look at collision and we just take a look at the simple collision, it's going to make basically a cube for us right around the object. So that's pretty good. If you don't want that, you can select it and you can actually delete it, and you can make your own kind of collision for this thing. But I think this is going to work pretty darn well. It's just a cube. So we can hit save, and we've got that going on right there for that. So we can take this and we can throw it into the world like this, and we've got a copy of it. So we just click and drag it out. The cool thing is it's got this move manipulator on it. If you select the object like this, and if you tap the space bar, you can cycle between move and translating something and rotating it, and you can also scale objects up too. Now if you have it on the move manipulator, you can either move it in world space or you can move it in object space. You can see if it's object space, it orients towards the object. So the other thing that's kind of cool about this is if you hold down Alt, you can click and drag out copies of things. So I'm going to drag out a copy of this, hold down Alt and click this here like this. It's got grid snapping on, and it's snapping to every 10 units currently. If you want to turn that off and just do very fine movement, you can turn that off and you can turn that back on. So I'm just going to push this here like this. I'm going to take another one of these, hold down Alt, and then click and drag over here like that. And then we're going to go ahead and just play within the viewer. And I'll tap F11 to kind of go into full screen mode and move around. And then so here's our first proxy version of what that crate will look like. Okay, so this is, I think, very important to kind of establish things about scale. You can actually test this out for gameplay purposes. You know, if it's too big or too small, then you might want to scale that and kind of figure out what's the right kind of scale that you want to go for, and also not only how it plays, but how does it visually kind of look. And so I think I'm pretty happy with that. I'll hit escape and then hit F11 to go back out of here. Now the other thing that we can do is if you kind of just click and drag, we can kind of move forward and backwards, kind of like we're driving a car, and you can rotate your mouse. If you add left click with right click, you can pan around and then move in an up and down motion too as well. And if you use the middle mouse wheel to kind of scroll in and out, that's kind of zooming. Another way to move is if you hold down the right mouse button and use WASD and then E and then Q to kind of move up and down. Now if you're used to moving around in Maya, if you select an object, you can tap F and you can frame something, and you can hold down Alt and left mouse and you can rotate around something. You can hold down Alt and middle mouse and pan, and you can hold down Alt and right mouse and kind of zoom in and out just like you do inside of Maya. So you've got a few different options for how you can kind of move around within the space. So I think this looks pretty decent to me. You see that you might have this thing for lighting needs to be rebuilt. If you want to check that out and start understanding just a little bit about lighting, we can go and say build, and we can say build lighting only, but we can change the lighting quality to set to preview. We can just try that real quick. So we'll say build lighting only, and it will start to build the lighting, build a, maybe load up this swarm agent. You might see that load up, but you'll probably definitely see this little indicator down here talking about it building kind of lighting for you right there. Okay, so lighting doesn't look all that great, and that's because we don't have very good UVs on here. Now, what I would like to show you is how could we update something inside of Maya and update it within here. So let's go back on over to Maya real quick, and let's open up the UV editor window. So I'm going to click under UV and say UV editor window like this. We might have the UV toolkit, and we can click and drag that, and it should be able to dock right off to the side here. That's kind of how I like to have this. So the other thing we could do is we could just go to UVs, and if you're going to do some down and dirty UVs, you could do this automatic, and it'll do 6 planes for you, kind of pushing this whole thing around for you. I don't think it's the best thing in the world, so I'm just going to show it to you and show you that it's an option. I'm going to hold down Alt Shift D to delete the history on that, and that was probably built up right over here. So the other thing I can do is go to UV and I'll do a planar map and I'll do the option box. So planar mapping is just like, imagine a camera and it just kind of pushes straight through your object based off of a camera direction. You can actually use the particular camera that you're doing. So if I do camera, you can see how it just kind of takes this view that we have and pushes straight through the object that way. We can also do these different axes that we have here. So I'm going to put it on the Z axis and just hit apply for that right there. So you can see it's taking this kind of plane and it's just kind of pushing it through at that point like that. I'm just doing that to establish something to get just UVs on the entire object. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this up real quick. So now I'm going to hit F10, or we can right click and say edge, and I'm going to select all these edges on the outer part like this, and just holding down Alt and left mouse to kind of rotate around as I do that. And accidentally select the wrong edge, so you just hit undo and holding down Shift and adding the selection of these. So I've got all the outer corner parts done on here. So I'm going to go here to the UV toolkit and we're going to say cut and sew. I'm just going to cut these, and this is basically imagine if you had to take your t-shirt, and you can see the seams that are on your t-shirt, and you had to take scissors and cut that apart on there and then lay out your t-shirt flat. That's kind of what we're doing with these UVs. We're taking a 3D object and we're cutting along certain edges to free them and open them up and make them separate objects so that we can lay these things out straight. So when we right click on here and we say UVs, UVs are they're almost like vertices. They feel like vertices, but they're actually moving around this UV information that you have here. So we're going to go to here and say unfold, and I'm just going to click unfold, and it should take each one of these pieces and do this to it. So to move around in here, you can hold down Alt and you can left mouse drag to pan around, and you can middle mouse drag to pan around. You can middle mouse to zoom in and out, or you can right Alt with right click to kind of zoom in and out as well. Now if you double click on one of these UV, it's going to select the entire shell for you, and you can tap W to put it on the move tool, and you can see we can start to move these things out like this. What I'm going to do is just use a tool that's within inside of Maya, and it's called the unfold, or not unfold tool, sorry, the arrange and layout area that we see here, and we're going to use layout. So that's going to click layout, and the options that I like for that is under, let's see here, under modify layout and do the option box. And you can see here's some of the options that I like to have here. I like to preserve these 3D ratios from the world. I want it to kind of scale everything based off of what it's seeing in the world. So it's possible you could just, it maybe tries to optimize and put things in a particular area, but I want it to kind of scale things for the UVs based off what it sees in the world. So once it's done doing its thing and kind of scaling everything, I know that these things are scaled about the right way, and I just never quite like the job that it does. So I'll double click on these as UVs, so we can right click and say that, and we can put it on W, E, and then R. So we've got move, we've got rotate, and then scale, right? I'm going to rotate this guy just a little bit, kind of straighten it up just like this, and kind of push it here. Double click on this one, scale it, and I'm going to try to do the best that I can to get these all squared up. I'm not going to be too crazy about it right now, just because this is our proxy object and we want to kind of do this job quick, just to get this in the game and get it to working to where we can bake our lighting and everything looks halfway decent with that. So I'll move this right here, double click this, move that. We'll do one more like this. Okay, so now we can select all of them, and now that I know they're all the same scale and everything, we can tap R and we can kind of scale everything up and make sure it fits in this 0 to 1 space that you see here. Okay, so here's our object. I'm going to hit F8. We're going to delete history. Remember that's under edit, delete by type, or we can hit Alt Shift D like that, delete history, and we can go ahead and save the scene. and I'm going to re-export this out as the FBX. So File, Export Selection. Okay, to export this out, we're just going to go to File, Export Selection, do the option box, just check the export selection, and we're going to go ahead and navigate to the FBX, select it, and overwrite the old file. Let's go ahead and say yes for that, and then let's hop back on over to UE4. So there's different ways that we can re-import this. We can right click and we can say re-import just like that, or if we take this and right click in this area that's open, we can say import and it'll try to override the thing here. If I double click, we can say re-import mesh in this area. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the UVs and do UV channel 0. So this is the old UVs, and let's just go ahead and click re-import mesh. And then you can see the changes that happen here. Okay, so here's the new updated UVs that we've got here, and you can see that we've got that. Let's just go ahead and right click on here and say save, so we can save the content for that. And we're going to go to build, and we can check out the lighting that we have going on here for this at this point. I'm going to go ahead and close up this window, just going to show there's no map errors, and you can see that it's going to kind of build the lighting over in this area. And then you should see that it kind of updates. So we've got a pretty decent look on there. If we want to go to this and go to lighting quality and change it from preview to production, we're going to get a much higher quality kind of look for it. The only thing is that it's going to take just a little bit longer to actually build the lighting quality on there. The other thing is that if we go into the details panel and you type in light, we've got a light map resolution for these different objects. So these are the amount of pixels that are being baked onto here, and you can see the default is 64. If we want to change it for all the objects, we can double click on here and then type in light into the details panel, and then we can go to the light map resolution and we can change that from 64 pixels to, we'll go at the next level up and do 128, and we can go ahead and save that. And then now for every one of the objects that are in the world, it'll do that resolution. Now it's going to have a better quality to it, but it's going to take a little bit longer. Let's just go ahead and build this lighting quality and put it in the production. So it's going to take just a little bit longer to build this up. So we're going to close this window again, and we'll take a look at it saying it's going to build its lighting info. Again, it's just going to be a little bit longer depending on that quality bump that you're doing. Something else to note about the light map resolution is that it is going to take a bit more memory. So it's just something that you want to think about, where you want to have the lowest light map resolution possible to get the kind of look that you're going for. And once that's established and everything's good, we'll take a look at this and see what it looks like now. So we can also tap G, and you can see we can hide these different game icons that are on the screen currently right here, like this. And we can move around in there. If you tap G again, you can bring everything back like this. But maybe the best way to do that is just hit play, and we'll tap F11, and then we can kind of run around within the level here and then take a look at the work that we've got. So I think now you see that we've got a very nice little pipeline established between Maya and UE4. We've done a proxy object to kind of get it in there, and then other departments can start working with that object. It's got a pretty decent look to it. But then we've also established a pipeline between Maya and UE4, so now we can start pushing assets back and forth between the two different programs.